Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that leave be given to bring in a bill to require public authorities letting contracts for major capital works to require contractors to provide apprenticeships and skills training and for connected purposes. And the reason, Mr. Speaker, for proposing this bill that I'm sure will have widespread support across the House is that we have seen in recent times some major disputes, notably at the East Lindsey oil refinery, at the Staithorpe power station in Nottinghamshire, and a new dispute emerging this very week at Milford Haven, whereby local workers and their unions have repeatedly made the case that they've been excluded from the ability to apply for jobs with major construction works. And I myself spoke at the Staithorpe workers' demonstration in Newark last year. I spoke again when the Staithorpe workers came to London to lobby ministers last month. And those workers and their unions have been very, very clear on their basic demands. I've had the opportunity to speak to them and listen to them in great detail. Their view is that it is wholly unfair that contracts can be let and they, as workers with the skills, have no opportunity even to apply for those jobs. The term that was used once by the current Prime Minister was British jobs for British workers. It's a theme that those workers at East Lindsey and Staithorpe took up. And they defined it, though sometimes in the reporting their clear definitions were lost. And I pay tribute to the way in which they conducted themselves, not least in ensuring that the bigots who attempted to attach themselves to those disputes were sent packing by the workforce and by the unions as it was appropriate they were. This bill gives the detail that spells out what that slogan put forward by the Prime Minister actually should mean. And it does so in three ways. Firstly, in terms of major public contracts, of which there are going to be very many. There have been major ones. Crossrail, for example, contracts recently been let. The Olympic Park, major capital contracts. Schools and hospital programmes, major contracts. But perhaps the biggest of all will be the contracts for the new nuclear power stations. Huge contracts in which thousands, indeed tens of thousands of workers will be employed directly and indirectly in constructing those power stations which this country so urgently needs. This bill, in the letting of those contracts and any other major public works over £50 million, would make a legal requirement that all jobs must be advertised in local job centres. A rather modest clause in a bill, but precisely the demand of those workers from my area and elsewhere in Nottinghamshire and the Midlands who were denied the opportunity at Staithorpe Power Station in order to apply for jobs. And let me say a word on the scandal of Staithorpe, comparable to the scandal of the East Lindsey oil refinery. Because what we've been able to demonstrate with the Staithorpe Power Station is what happened was employers cut the wages and conditions of British workers by flying in workers, in the case of Staithorpe, 300 from Italy, putting them in cheap dormitories, underpaying them as opposed to the local negotiated and national negotiated pay rates, with some major questions on health and safety. What this bill does is makes it much harder for that to happen and would make it illegal not to allow for those jobs to be advertised in local job centres. But it does something in terms of contract compliance that is far more powerful in two other clauses. The first is to put a requirement on all public contracts of any size, and the figure put forward in this bill, Mr. Speaker, is over £50 million, that 2% of the entire workforce, including subcontractors and sub-subcontractors and agency workers, that 2% should be new apprentices. When there is a major power station, West Burton, for example, in my constituency, a new gas power station being built at the moment, and particularly when it is the public purse who is letting and paying for those contracts, then 2%, if there are 1,000 workers, would be 20 apprentices. 20 apprentices for 1,000 workers seems to me a modest but a reasonable input into developing skills in letting all major public contracts. Secondly, a specific legal requirement that within all contracts there must be a precise 1 hour's training per week done in conjunction with local colleges for the existing workforce. What that means, and it's particularly crucial in relation to new nuclear build, is that we upgrade the skills at all levels of our workforce. Determined, of course, by the companies, and it's reasonable that they should be determining what skills are required, so that when they're winning these major contracts, with local training providers, they upgrade and give us the skills in the future, both in building and managing, be it big power stations, be it other major public works. That combination gives an economic advantage, a competitor advantage in all contracts to companies who have an employment base in this country. And it disadvantages those companies such as Bechtel, the US company, winning contracts, who come in and hover up employees from elsewhere, including from competitors in this country, every time they win a contract in this country, contributing nothing to the skills base, doing the work and getting out. That is, I think, a realistic definition of that slogan, British jobs for British workers, because as we all know, British workers, including those on the demonstrations, are of all colours, of all creeds, indeed have been born in many different lands, but those living in this country, paying taxes in this country, they should have that ability to do this work. And finally, Mr. Speaker, I shall reiterate the point on apprentices, because we've got this huge new nuclear build. Vast numbers of workers will be employed. It should be companies based in this country, such as Laing O'Rourke, employing 350, in a world-leading precast cement works in Worksop in my constituency, who are winning these contracts. Not companies from afar, poaching the workforce and contributing nothing to the skills base, but for the young people of this country. The thought that we could build these new nuclear power stations without large numbers of new apprentices, learning the building skills and also learning the power station management skills, would be not just outrageous, which it would be, but self-defeating economically for this country. And therefore I am certain, Mr. Speaker, that wise counsel on all sides of this House will be enthusiastically supporting this bill which I am bringing forward today, one which has the support of the workers that I have met from East Lindsey and Staithorpe and their unions as a way forward out of this dispute, where morally and economically they are in the right and the employers are in the wrong.
The honourable member have leave to bring in his bill. As many as are of that opinion say aye. The contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Who will prepare and bring in the bill?
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Jamie Reid, Mr. Lindsay Hoyle, Mr. Frank Field, Mr. Bob Spink, Mr. Rob Flello, and myself, sir.
John Mann.
Major Capital Contracts Skills Training Requirements Bill.
Second reading what day?
Friday, 12th of March.
Friday the 12th of March. We come now...